Thank you everyone for joining us. We're super excited to have Julie and Lindsay. They're both from Luchtdorf and they're going to talk with us about strategic planning. It's so important. So we're very excited to be able to have you guys here and present this important topic because I think a lot of people don't, they don't think about it. They're like, oh, I don't need a strategic plan. I'm just going to work and I'm just going to do my business. And so we're super excited. We've heard very positive reviews of your strategic planning sessions. And so we're super excited to have you guys come and talk with us today.
We're really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and Julie and I, we're in the same building, but we're in different offices. So my thought is, since we're kind of a smaller group, what we'll probably do is keep this pretty casual. We have a fair amount of content, but please don't hesitate to jump in with questions as we go. I mean, we've saved room for questions at the end, but we can keep this very conversational because we want this to be as helpful as possible. So if you have a thought and you're afraid about losing it, just pop right in. I think it's also important to maybe just note a couple things about us and our background. So the first thing, I'm Lindsay Downen. We are in the middle of rebranding, which will probably also come up as part of our strategic planning discussion, but Luchtdorf is now New Narrative. So just want to put that out there. We're very excited for that. My role here, I'm one of the clinical directors, and I think it's important to note that in my history of work within this field, I've only ever worked in behavioral health. And I've worked in community behavioral health and nonprofits, but I've also worked in health systems. So I just point that out because I'll let Julie kind of give a little intro on herself, but I think it's important just for you all to know I'm relatively siloed in my experience in that way. But you will hear shortly why that's kind of helpful in some ways too for strategic planning. Julie, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Julie Ibrahim. I am the other clinical director at Luchtdorf. I've been with Luchtdorf for, I want to say, around 7 years, and I've been in the mental health field for about 10 years. It's a second career for me. My first career was working in Fortune 500 companies in the product supply, leadership, various leadership positions, everything from finance to logistics to procurement to sitting on division leadership teams. So I have a combination of business and mental health experience. But I can tell you I'm far happier in my second career than my first career. So I'm really glad I made the shift and am really, really happy working for what is now New Narrative. As Lindsay said, we're going through a major rebranding, new name, new logo, new vision and mission statement, some of which we'll share with you today, because that is all part of the strategic planning process, starting with a vision.
Yes. So I think we'll transition into, Julie's going to screen share. So we have a PowerPoint. And we are happy, I think, Julie, to share this as needed too with folks afterwards if you want copies. Jessica has it as well. So it is something we're happy to provide to you all. And then we'll kind of segue in to our agenda.
Just give me a minute here to...
Perfect.
You see that okay, Lindsay?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our goals for the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, and then we'll certainly leave space for questions and kind of debriefing. We'll talk about what is a strategic plan and why have one for your organization or company, where to start. So as we were kind of mentioning earlier, there's a lot of foundational work that comes before you even start going into strategic planning. And we'll make sure that we address all of those for you guys today. Then we'll spend some time talking about the actual components of what goes into a strategic plan. And we'll transition into the process of strategic planning. And then we'll definitely spend some time talking about success factors. And I'll just give a little bit of context, maybe Julie, as you go into the next slide. As Debbie's aware, because she's one of our board members for Luchtdorf and now New Narrative and has been with us for a while, Julie and I, we've gone through a strategic planning process more than one time with our organization. And so we've definitely seen where There's opportunity for improvement in strategic planning. And I think over the course of the last year to 18 months, we really took the opportunity to say, how can we enhance our strategic plan? And that's part of the reason we're pretty excited to be here. Because when you have done something once and you know it doesn't work for you, and you're willing to see it as a learning opportunity, you have a lot more opportunity for growth and success on your future rounds. And I think that that's something we're happy to acknowledge, is we didn't get to where we are today without having some, frankly, obstacles, hurdles, and mistakes along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the strategic plan, the strategic planning process, it's not a one-time thing. It's a living document. It's an ongoing process that you build into your business protocols and your business routines, and that's what makes it effective. What's not effective is to do it once, put it on the shelf, and not integrate it into your operations. And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to our next slide. So, as you see here, your a strategic plan is essentially your guidance to fulfill your mission. And again, we as a nonprofit, we have an established mission. You may, as you know, depending on the nature of your organization, I don't know if you all have mission statements, you know, that's really for you to determine what's best. But we see our strategic plan as our company guidance to fulfill our mission statement. And we're going to talk about mission statements and visions and so forth here in a minute. Essentially, a strategic plan is going to enable your company to stay focused and really to execute the priorities that optimize the impact and efficiency of supporting your mission. So it's your roadmap. It's essentially saying, you know, how are we going to get done what we have said we are going to get done? Because that's a lot of different pieces, you know, and sticking to the roadmaps, you know, analogy, that is your intersections and your side roads and who's driving, who are your passengers, how are you going to get there, what vehicle are you taking, and so forth. It is all of those pieces. And I think it really is a way of focusing on success and looking at how can you be successful, not just in moving through periods of challenging periods, but knowing that you might get to an end goal and then there's going to be a new goal. It's not necessarily that you complete your strategic plan. If you've completed your strategic plan, that is an indicator that you are ready for a new one. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Julie?
Yeah, just keeping in mind that, again, it's a living document that you're constantly reviewing and possibly modifying and course correcting. And I want to emphasize it's about focus. It keeps your organization focused. I've experienced this many times in my career in organizations that they start to drift in the everyday ebb and flow of meetings and emails and you know, the latest emergency and so forth. This helps keep you really on point as an organization. And we'll talk a little bit about the, you know, kind of the tactics to keep you on point and to keep this process alive.
Definitely. Okay. So here, what you're seeing is where we start, kind of the foundation of what you need when you go into strategic planning. So really, as an organization or company, you start by assessing and developing your vision, your mission, and your values for your company. Your vision, it's a very concise, inspirational statement about the impact you want your company to make on people, communities, and the world. Your mission differs from your vision because it is, while it's also a clear and simple statement, it's about how your company will deliver the vision. So you're getting even more specific with your mission statement than your vision statement. Your vision statement tends to be very, not only inspirational, but aspirational for the community around you. And then when we speak about values, what we're really addressing is your organizational values that guide your decision-making and declare how you will interact with your employees, those you serve, and your community and the world around you. So you could have your very aspirational vision statement, your more specific mission statement, and then your values. You can have several values, and those can kind of be the foundational framework of how your organization is structured. And we're going to kind of give you examples not only from our organization of New Narrative, but we'll tie in another local organization that people
And
are
I
pretty
would say,
familiar with.
I would say the first mistake we made when we did our original pass at our strategic plan was we didn't focus enough on this. We focused more on, you know, how do we grow the top line? How do we make money? How do we become more efficient? How do we support ourselves financially? And we found we just weren't getting a lot of traction, and that's because we weren't really focused on the work and the reason for why we were in the world and wanting to change the world. And once we got that right, then our strategy process took off.
And I would also add, and this is something you're probably going to hear from both of us, there is time and investment and work in solidifying these three things. You don't just sit down one day. I mean, maybe a vision comes to you, but it's for most organizations or people, this is something that takes dedicated work to establish what your vision is, what your mission is, and what your values are. You can spend weeks, months, lots of time on this, especially if on an organizational level, this is not, and nor should it, live with one person. You know, this can be a very collective experience. And so I think be prepared for that. And we're going to talk a little bit too about what that looked like for us as an organization and how it shifted over time. But I think really starting to have conversations with yourself about, you know, what the values are. We spent a lot of time as a team, even amongst not just the organization, but within our leadership team. What are our values? What is the why of why we come into work every day? Why we do this work? You know, a lot of people feel like that's a luxury and maybe something too philosophical to spend their time on, but that is really what roots you and creates a solid. You're probably not creating a solid foundation to build your strategic plan on. So I think we really do want to emphasize that those things that sound aspirational or maybe too philosophical for some people, they're really significant and important, and don't belittle, you know, the time that you spend on those things.
Yeah, because I would maintain that it doesn't matter what you are offering, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, whether you're making widgets or you're, you know, providing mental health services or trying to save the world in some way. It really doesn't matter. It is foundational for any kind of business that you're in, I think, to do this work and you know, think of your values as kind of your rules of engagement with your organization, with your employees, with your customers, with your world.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, so we're just going to kind of give examples of those three here. So when we talk about vision, we said that concise, inspirational statement about the impact you want your company to make on people, communities, and or the world. So for the next few slides, we're going to give you some examples. We're going to, you know, we decided to go with a company that's local and well known. So for Nike, their vision is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And while that might not be something that like rings a bell for you as much as their tagline, clearly when you see that, that relates to all things that Nike does, which is very broad. So I don't think that any of us are surprised to see that that is their vision statement. It's very applicable, and it is exceptionally aspirational. You know, when we went through our review of our strategic plan after our first go round several years ago, and we kind of recalibrated and I would say reassessed our foundation, as our organization went through this process, we shifted our vision statement. So our new vision statement for New Narrative is a future where everyone seeking mental health care can live the life they choose. Again, very aspirational, you know, very much thinking about individuals who we are providing services to, and really thinking about what we want to see in the world for mental health care. You know, we looked beyond just what are the needs right here in Tigard, in Washington County, in the Portland region. We took it beyond that, because that's, you know, what we're striving for is something bigger than what we're doing right now. And that's okay. Like that's because it's something that we are, you know, always going to be working towards. And I think that that's part of there's always something to be working towards. That's your vision.
And the reason to make it short and concise, one statement, some folks even have just phrases, is because communication of your vision is really important too, both internally and externally. You want it to be something that people can easily remember, a soundbite, if you will, that encapsulates the vision. So you don't want it to be long and cumbersome for people to say and to remember.
And then we transition back to our mission. So how your company is delivering on its vision. So going back to Nike, their mission is to create groundbreaking sports innovations, make our products sustainably, build a creative and diverse global team, and make a positive impact in communities where we live and work. Again, it's getting more specific. You as a community member and maybe as someone who uses Nike products, you wouldn't necessarily be able to quote that, but that is something that is rooted in the nature of the work that they do, that their whole team and all their employees are probably very much aware of and can probably recite to you. And again, it speaks to what we know of them as an organization, as a company, even if it's not something we ourselves as a consumer of theirs are aware of. And for us as a nonprofit organization and taking our vision to the next step of a mission statement, we have modified our mission statement to now be, from clinical care and peer support programs to housing, we provide resources so people seeking mental health care can develop the tools to thrive, not just survive. So again, you can start to see how we're getting more specific, but it's still relatively inspirational and aspirational.
You can think of this as the what is the how behind the mission, is the how behind the what of the vision, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then values. And this is an area that I love to talk about, values. I do a lot of training for our staff members on ethics, you know, like boundaries and ethics. And we spend a lot of time talking values because it is so foundational to the work that you're doing and why you as an employee are coming in and doing the work that you're doing. So your company or your organization's values are going to guide those decisions. They're going to declare how you interact with your employees, those that you serve, and the world. So Nike, their values, and again, this is all, you know, available to everybody. People want to communicate to the world their values. You can go hop on a Nike website. You can find this. Same thing with our website. Nike values are community, sustainability, diversity, and social responsibility. It's pretty common, and Julie, correct me if you feel differently. Most organizations are going to have several values identified or listed. You're typically seeing a minimum of 3, quite often more. So just be prepared, but they're not, they tend to be pretty specific. Okay.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Our values, one of the things that we've done with our rebranding was we looked a lot at the language we were using and the impact of language. And we saw that some of our previously identified values were almost overly simplified. And we really wanted something that spoke to, that really reverberated back to our aspirational vision. So we've modified our values, and now they are to inspire belonging, dare to make a difference, to partner with service recipients, to celebrate the present and the possible, and to lead by earning trust. So we really said in our values, it's beyond just having an adjective or a descriptor. It's really recognizing the connection of our work and the person who might be receiving those services. Such as, it's not just having partnership, it's really partner with service recipients. And it's not just celebrating or having a sense of optimism. It's recognizing that sometimes the present might not be great, and that's okay, and the possible could be. So you see where we've kind of done our own twist and said we don't want it to be overly simplistic. And that was our preference. Again, organizations are going to differ here. And we really want, you know, just as a side note for all of you, we talk about our values. We ask people in the interview process, what are their values? Is there alignment? Have they done their homework? Are they aware of the values of the organization? Because this is really can be space where you can start to look at fit. And I think we've all probably been there at some point in time where if you don't have values alignment, fit is going to, questionable fit is going to become pretty evident quickly in terms of, are you the right fit for this organization? Because if you're not in alignment with the values, chances are you're not motivated, and we all know what lack of motivation will do for employees.
That's a really good point to bring up about integrating some of this work into your actual recruiting practices and interviewing practices, so that the culture that you're trying to create is continues to be cohesive, and you're not constantly dealing with change management around folks that are just not on board,
Yeah.
So, starting with the whole recruiting and interviewing process,
Yeah.
is something that we've learned to incorporate our values into.
Yeah. And this comes out, once you establish in a recruiting context, but it comes out in team meetings, it comes out in individual, management or supervisory meetings, it can come up in annual reviews, where is their alignment? Maybe there's not alignment with all, but with some, how does that tie into professional development opportunity and so forth. So I think really starting to recognize that when you have these foundations embedded across the culture of your organization, you also will find that you have greater buy-in, awareness, and commitment to strategic planning. Because as we're going to talk about, your strategic plan, it's not a private document either. It should be something that is available and accessible to all folks. Okay. So you go through your vision, your mission, and your values. The other really key piece of foundational work that you should give consideration to before even going into strategic planning is do a SWOT analysis or some sort of comprehensive evaluation of your company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I mean, that is a SWOT analysis. And maybe you don't use a SWOT format. We did. I think we've really leaned into this. I think a lot of organizations do, but it's essentially doing the pre-work of, let's start with seeing where we have growth opportunities internally. So just doing a SWOT analysis can be, it can take time. And we've done this in a variety of different ways. And that was something that I just really wanted to hone in on. You can do this across teams. You can do this as integrated teams. The key thing I think for doing a SWOT analysis is, from a starting place, is involve a variety of people, and a variety of roles and a variety of perspectives. However, you also want to be mindful that when you're a group of individuals doing a SWOT analysis, do you have enough trust and agreement within the group that people can speak freely? Because if you are running an organization and you have someone who's maybe frontline, working reception, or working, on a sales floor, and they have to go into a meeting with a manager or a regional director or someone who's in a higher position of power, is that person going to feel safe and comfortable to say, hey, I think a real weakness we have here is this? So really be mindful of the dynamic of evaluation. You want those perspectives and you want them to be authentic to really get a true lay of the land, but you need to have people be comfortable in sharing that perspective with you. Go ahead, Julie.
This is really where the kind of the more nuts and bolts of the strategic plan work starts.
Yeah.
Because these are the areas you're going to have to address in your strategic plan, and almost every organization that I've worked with does one of these in terms of developing their strategies. And we were going to include some examples in here, but we thought it might be getting a little bit long, so I can send those along to you all. In fact, Nike's SWOT is really impressive. You might want to read that, and I can send that along to you guys afterwards.
Yeah. And so really recognizing you have your 4 categories with a key feature on your strengths and weaknesses are really characteristics that are internal to the business. Opportunities, threats tend to be the external opportunities. So maybe the opportunity for growth or environmental threats are things around us. I mean, frankly, COVID. is an external threat. Well, and for maybe some businesses, you know, in healthcare, an opportunity too. But again, that's an example of something that's external. None of us went into March with that in mind when you were probably planning, but it's the recognition that the environment around us is going to have an influence. And is that influence an opportunity or a threat? And being mindful of that. And what that means is, depending on how your environment is shifting or how your organization internally is shifting, you may have to take times to do a SWOT, you know, I wouldn't say scheduled, but, you know, you might have to, again, adapt and do SWOTs with greater frequency, depending on the nature of the work that you're doing. And so recognizing that and calling that out. You know, and sometimes we do SWOTs around project development and other opportunities that we see as a means of looking at, is this worthwhile? Is this going to integrate within what we're doing? It doesn't have to be a tool simply used as a foundation for strategic planning. Okay, so once, again, you kind of get through those pieces, your vision, mission, values, and SWOT analysis, then we want to start talking about the components of a strategic plan. And for us, we've kind of laid out from the top level down what our components are, and these are pretty common components of a strategic plan. You're going to start with your focus areas, and then you're going to get a little bit more specific in terms of your goals, and then you're going to get even more specific with your objectives, and then very specific with your action plans. And earlier, I think when we were starting the call and doing introductions, I mentioned how I've only ever worked in the behavioral health field. And what's interesting to me is that when we strategically plan, this is actually a very similar process to like treatment planning. When you're working with an individual and they're coming in for therapy or counseling and you're saying, you know, what are the goals that you have? What's brought you in here? What am I going to provide you? You know, the interventions, the objectives to help you get to that plan. This is very similar actually for us as an organization of what a lot of our staff members spend time doing on a day-to-day basis. So I think that that's actually a benefit that we have in terms of not necessarily buy-in, but certainly awareness, you know, because people are so ingrained in doing that process that now they're just seeing it apply, not to the individual, but to the organization. And I think that that's a very exciting advantage in many ways that we have as an organization, is there is some degree of familiarity with planning in that respect. Okay, and then also we want to note that once you get into your strategic plan and you have those focus areas, goals, objectives, action plans, you're going to have a financial plan. You know, yes, a strategic plan is going to have to take into consideration financial implications. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the weaving of the financial plan and overlaying that with your mission, vision, values, and your SWOT, because clearly it's an impact. It's going to have an impact. And then we're going to talk about, and you would incorporate an implementation plan. So you have a strategic plan, great. Like Julie said earlier, just because you create it, you don't shelve it. Like, it is a living document and you are actually doing work. You should be doing work day in and day out that's a reflection of what is in your strategic plan. It's your roadmap, so it's kind of guiding the work that you're doing. And if the work that you're doing is nowhere to be found in your strategic plan, then that's probably time for some reevaluation. And then finally, timing. You know, it's a living document and it can be adjusted, but you do want to give yourself some, you know, goals in terms of how long is completion of this action plan? How long is this goal going to take? You know, because you want to look at that timing to evaluate, where am I investing my time now? Where am I investing my time 2 years from now? What teams are working on what projects within the next 6 months, and so forth. So you got to put some parameters on it. That's where it's going to get more structured, frankly.
Typically, strategic plans are, some are 3 years, some are 5 years. I think 3 years are falling more into favor these days because of the uncertainty of 5 years out. But typically it's either a 3-year time frame or a 5-year time frame. And obviously there is phasing of all of your goals and objectives throughout that time frame, and, you know, a financial plan laid against that. And there's an iterative process that goes with that. And we'll explain that in a minute here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we're going to kind of dive in and look at our example. And I think that this is what Debbie was referencing maybe when she's talked to this group and a lot of the work that we've done over the course of the last year and 18 months. So for the focus areas, which you're seeing right now on your screen, these are the major categories to be addressed to support your mission. So for us, we have selected 3 focus areas for New Narrative. We want to focus on our programs and services. And within our programs and services, we're really looking at, is there opportunity for growth and integration? We know that we provide a lot of different services and we have a lot of different programs in our organization. They're geographically spread, so we have programs in different locations, and we have programs with their own vision, mission, and values, if you will. And we know that one of our focus areas is how do we have better integration across our programs and services. So again, this is a very broad area, but it's a focus area for us. Relationship and culture is another focus area for us. This is really speaking to the needs of our employees and how we as an organization can establish a strong culture for them. They are our ambassadors, if you will, and I think every organization should feel that way, that anybody you hire is an ambassador and a representation of your organization. So are they feeling confident and comfortable within the organization you have created and the relationships that they have in their organization? That can be anything from the dynamics that they have with other team members and other staff members, dynamics they have with leadership, not just their direct manager, but senior leadership, and so forth. Again, it's a broad focus area, but for us, this was really how can we talk about our staff and our team, whereas programs and services is really our service recipients and the people coming in and receiving that service.
And the reason why we made a major focus on relationship and culture is because we provide a service, not a thing, a service. And the asset, if you will, if you talk about it in business parlance, that generates that service and that revenue is our people. And so this focus area is about investing in the folks that really generate all the services, generate all the revenue for us, are the engine of our organization. Yeah. Versus say a manufacturing organization or something that's more kind of capital asset heavy, if you will.
Yeah, we want the value of our assets, our team members, to go up, and the way that we can do that as a nonprofit is not just in what we can pay as a rate. It is the nature of when they come to work every day, are they motivated to do that? So this is, our focus on that piece of our asset management, if you will. And then finally, our third focus area, which we'll own, is probably our fuzziest focus area, but we recognize that we are doing work that overlays into social justice needs. When we talk about housing and homelessness services, the need, even just how mental health has been perceived within the world around us, and our aspirational vision of what we're striving for, we know that is going to take some advocacy. We also know that is not an area that we have actually put a high degree of focus on previously. So for us, when we look at that 2020 to 2025 time range, we know that we might actually have to invest more time up front on our program services and growth and integration focus area and our relationship and culture focus area in order to get to an advocacy focus area. We want to make sure that we have things strong and established well internally before we go external. If that makes sense. Okay. So then again, once you have your established focus areas, you get down into your goals, which are the further breakdown of the main focus areas. So an example, this is just the example from the program and services and the growth and integration. We have 3 identified goals. We need to develop programs that target specific community needs. We need to increase peer integration and services. And I'm not going to go down, you know, kind of the mental health language of what that means, but it's an awareness that we have programs that are run by individuals who identify as having lived experience with mental health, and we need to do a better job of integrating those programs into kind of the more traditional clinic-based model of mental health, the more institutionalized historical context of how service delivery has happened. And our third goal is we need to increase access to affordable housing. We do actually provide a lot of housing in a lot of different ways for our population and our community. And we know that this is an ongoing goal of not just the folks we're serving, but of a need within our community as well.
So to help you continue to connect this back to our mission, these bundles of goals here are to help us create a more holistic package of services for our clients to help them build a whole life for themselves, not just address their mental health symptoms. So if you go back to our vision and our mission, this connects directly back there. How do we help people build their best life versus just deal with their illness?
Yeah. What do you need to thrive, not just survive? You know, and that's, again, connected. And that's part of our language, and that's part of the discussion that we have with our teams on a regular basis. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to go over all this because it's a lot, but now you're starting to see we had our focus areas, we had our goals, now we're having objectives. These are the very specific projects that are going to support your goals. So you're going to see we have a lot of topics, and then we have objectives, and we have expected outcomes. Sometimes those objectives are going to be, hey, you're doing this, it's working, we want to grow it. We want to expand on this. Sometimes it's going to be, this is a need, we have to create this. And as you all know, creating something from scratch is going to potentially take a lot more time than expanding. Maybe not. And again, that's going to be very unique to you and your strategic plan. But what the intention here is to acknowledge that you're getting more and more specific in terms of what is it going to take to fulfill the goal, to fulfill that focus area, to tie everything back to your mission, vision, and your values. Okay?
Yeah, the basic structure of a strategic plan is you start with a big dream, and you keep getting more and more and more and more specific with each level until you are right down to here's an action plan with a date, with an outcome, with a person responsible, and we'll show you that level of detail here in a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah. Okay. And then after you get down, this is the kind of that detail Julie was talking about, you get into action plans. These are very specific actions that you're going to take that have the SMART criteria, so the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound criteria that are tied to those objectives. And you start to have accountability and timelines. This is where you're saying, we're going to put some start dates and we're going to put some end dates. And we're also going to say, how are we measuring this? Like, is it, you know, again, going back to a more business example, is it the amount of product you're producing? Is it a total number of contacts that you're having? Is it, you know, and for us as an organization, it could be how many people are available, or how many slots do you have for people to get into a program? And do you have the infrastructure to sustain that? Again, and you're going to assign someone who's going to be leading this. You know, someone who is taking the ownership and the responsibility of, I have to check in about this. This is now embedded within the nature of the work that I'm doing day in or day out. Again, we're not shelving it. This is happening as a part of our calendar. You know, this is where you're getting very specific, and the work is starting, frankly.
Yeah, and so the staff that are assigned here, then they have little mini projects here, A, B, and C, that they have to complete by these end dates to stay on track with the strategy. And by the time we complete all of these action items, we will have an expanded program in this particular objective area, which will be serving more clients, meeting more of the community need, generating more income and profit for the agency. That's how you get down to this is where the rubber meets the road of your strategic plan.
So I just want to take a moment, and like Julie said on the last slide, but even more so here, we've really gone from the macro, aspirational vision to the specific, I have to do this by this day and, test the feasibility of what we have talked about. So you really kind of see that inverted pyramid of how we went from very big to very specific. And that very specific success can then start to, rebuild you back up, if you will. So I just want to call that out, that's where the work comes in. And then this is also where, having to adapt can come in. Because depending on what happens as a result of the action plan, this is where you can start to see, the feasibility or are adjustments needed. We'll talk about that some too. Okay. Oh, so this is also, we have to talk about the financial planning. An effective strategic plan, you're going to have to develop a financial forecast of your strategic plan. You have to know, is your strategic plan fiscally sound and is it going to be able to meet your company's financial goals? So I want to step back for a minute and acknowledge that what Julie had said was a few years ago, I'll say like 5 or 6 years ago now, our last strategic plan was really driven with a financial forecast goal and outcome. We wanted to be an organization that had a certain amount of revenue, and how were we going to get there? And while we went through this process, starting again a year to 18 months ago, and we certainly revisited and brought back more of the vision and mission into our plan, we can't deny the need for the financial forecasting. It is necessary. You need to know if it's even feasible for you to do what you have established in your plan. Like, let's call that out too. So when you're developing that financial forecast, that first step that you're wanting to take is you want to have a base case projection of your revenues, expenses, and profit if nothing's going to be changing. So you need to start building some assumptions.
As if nothing is going to be changing.
Yeah. Which, it's, we recognize things are constantly changing, but you need to take a moment in time and just say, here, as is, what are we looking at? And this is your base case for that financial projection. You want to include assumptions, though, about potential organic growth of existing revenue sources and future revenue sources that you can reasonably count on. And again, be mindful of that. This is not the time to be aspirational. This is your base case. This is what your projections have, or not your projections. This is what you can see in your historic performance. You're not deviating strongly from that. Yeah. You want to be mindful of your growth and cost factors that are going to impact your business. Are you going to just naturally have minimum wage growth and competitive wage pressure? Depending on your business and frankly, living where we do, minimum wage growth is something that you should be accounting for because we know it's happening around us. So take that into consideration in your base case. And then you want to look at CPI, your consumer price indices. They're going to project growth in cost items over time. Your utilities, communication, transportation costs, material costs, all of that. Factor those in. You want to include those assumptions because they are regular assumptions that are constants for all of us. So factor those into that base case. Then you want to look at your strategic plan areas using that base case. And then you're going to start to add in projections of new revenue and associated expenses, as well as the potential cost savings projects, or as well as potential cost savings based on your strategic plan objectives by the year. So an example of this, the last action plan that Julie showed, and we don't need to necessarily look at it, but we know that if we're expanding a program and we're going to open up additional slots so more people can come in, that is going to have an impact on our top line revenue. Great, we're going to get more reimbursement because we've brought more people in. However, we will hit a tipping point where in order to sustain that increase in people coming in, our cost is going to go up because we will most likely need additional staff and other folks to support those slots. So now we're looking at the levers that you can pull. With this amount of revenue coming in, how much is our expense going up? And this is where you can start to look at your scenarios based or using that base case of the initial financial projection or the initial financial forecast that you did.
And our financial manager has built a model where we can run multiple scenarios.
Yes.
Because this is very much an iterative process as you're building your plan and kind of discussing different strategic ideas and different ways to go. Having a financial model that's fairly easily changeable and modifiable is really going to be helpful for you to figure out the financial impact of the kind of the business moves you want to make.
And just be aware, you want to feel pretty comfortable and confident with that base case projection. You know, like that, just getting there is going to be a process within itself, and recognize, and you know, depending on the support that you have and the team members that you have and who's running the finances of your organization, that may come easier. But just be mindful, that is such a foundational piece that is connected to your strategic plan that it warrants a lot of time and investment. Okay, because you're returning to it all the time as you're pulling new levers and you're adding new options and looking at, you know, changes. Okay. So building a strategic plan is a really big project. Let's not deny that, because it is something that's going to guide you for 3 to 5 years. So you want to have a strong and committed strategic planning committee. You know, and that's going to look different for different organizations and your size. Maybe that, you know, if you're a side hustle, you're it, you know, but maybe you also seek counsel and you check in with other people, you know, who are running other similar side hustles, and you make sure that you're kind of getting some additional perspectives. You're going to want a committee. If you are a committee or if you are a team, you want to have a leader who has some project management skills and someone who is also in a position where they can make some decisions to keep this project moving. You don't want to get in a position where you have a committee but no lead, where your committee becomes stagnant. That's the last thing that you want. So at the end of the day, you need to have someone who's going to make a decision or an agreement or consensus from that committee that they're not coming out unless a decision has been made. So to have some ownership of that. And then recognize that that committee is going to be in charge of developing the implementation plan and driving the process of the strategy development, the launch, and the maintenance. So again, your committee, your group, whoever's involved in this, they're committing. You know, for us as an organization, our committee really was our leadership team, but we recognized that as a leadership team, we can't deny the lane that we are in. So we took our strategic, I guess the phrase I would use is we took it on the road. We said, hey, managers, other staff members, advisory boards, these are some of the components. We need your feedback and we need your perspective. And we did that in really mindful ways of subgroups and so forth, because we recognized that there was a power dynamic there and we still wanted that authentic feedback. And so we were really mindful of how we could get that feedback in a way that could influence the plan or for us to change as necessary.
Yeah, this really does depend on your size. I mean, really, really big companies like Nike, they have a permanent strategic planning department. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for a company our size, we literally used our leadership team and brought in extra people, as Lindsay said, for more input. And for some folks, it's going to, you know, sole proprietors, it's going to be themselves with some advisors. So yeah. It really just does depend on your size, but you can still follow a process.
Yeah. And I think that that's where you also see that variance depending on your, you know, your size. This could be a process that takes you weeks into a couple months, you know, into months, or it could be months or years, because even though our leadership team was a part of that strategic plan, committee, we still had other operational duties we had to adhere to. You know, we're not big enough that this is our job day in, day out. This is a very key piece of all the work that we're doing, but the dedicated time towards it, you know, it's not, we don't have 40 hours a week to think only strategic plan. You know, we still have operations. We still have to keep our organization running in other ways too. this is also a time where, you know, if you have the means or you have the access, maybe consider utilizing another firm to help you facilitate the development of your vision, mission, values, and do a SWOT. You know, is it in your best interest to have someone else come in and really facilitate those conversations to maybe dismantle some of the power structure and dynamics? We worked with a fantastic firm when we talked about rebranding, and their emphasis on the language that we used really truly had an impact on the modified vision, mission, and values that we had. You know, we spent a lot of time getting a lot of input with that firm and having them, you know, come in and facilitate larger group discussions. So that was something that we took advantage of. And again, if you're a sole proprietor or you're running solo, do you have connection through other means, even to start to have conversations with this, so that you're not having to carry, you know, all of this on you with no other perspective? As much as you can be, if you can, you know, include leadership, staff, you can include client, consumers, customers. That's huge. You know, do you have a means of getting feedback from who you're serving? I think that that's something to take into consideration, and how much time are you spending on that? And if you have stakeholders, you know, getting their feedback as well. All of those individuals were included in our process for rebranding, you know, which also led to reevaluation of the vision, mission, and values for us as an organization. Okay. So you have in front of you kind of this sequence, you know, in going through all this, which is pretty much a summary of a lot of the things that we've already gone over. But the key thing, I'm going to skip down to number 7, is eventually when you have all this in place, you're going to have to communicate your strategic plan and then really start to talk about this. And I think that that's where you go back, if you have a board, going back to your employees, going back to your customers, and just being mindful of what is it going to take for you to communicate this plan? How much time is that within itself? For us at our organization, we have to take into consideration who's communicating to what teams, when is that happening? You know, can that all happen within a designated time frame? So it's not like one team knows about the strategic plan for months and another team doesn't. You know, we want to have equity in that process and access to it. And, you know, what does that mean logistically for who's going to be providing that and doing it? And then once that communication has happened, or simultaneously as you're communicating your strategic plan, build in the time to review your plan at a minimum once a month. But you need to start to track, you know, are those action plans happening? Are you getting the objectives that you want met? You know, have you completed a goal? Have you completed a goal, but you want to continue on in this focus area and now add a new goal? Again, this is where you start to go into revision phase if needed, or adjustments, because as Julia said several times, this is a living document. And the only reason it can stay a living document is if you're continuously tending to it and making sure that it's getting the attention it needs. Julie, you have anything else in terms of sequencing?
I just wanted to point out that the actual work in developing the structure of it, the focus, the goals, the objectives, what everybody's going to work off of, that could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. So just kind of be prepared for a time commitment. It depends on how big your company is, obviously. But don't feel bad about that time commitment, because remember, you're planning for the next 3 to 5 years, and so it's worth the time investment. You'll see on the next slide, one of the points we make is don't rush the process.
Yeah.
And I'll go to that next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think success factors, these are all things that we've seen work in our favor and maybe not. You know, frankly, that we can speak to what we have found as an organization to be successful versus what's created obstacles or roadblocks for us. Doing that foundational work, a side benefit of it, if you will, is it can be a really good opportunity for some pretty effective team building, frankly, if that's also something that you're in need of. but you start to really have a greater awareness of what's driving the folks that you're working with. And again, assessing fit and so forth. I think it's just something that is a side benefit that comes from that. We've talked about the need for being inclusive, really emphasizing the importance on that planning committee and their time and who has the time and commitment to do that. And also recognizing strategic thinking is not everyone's forte, and that's okay. You know, there are going to be some folks who might be far more invested and interested in this, and there might be some folks who are just like, hey, tell me what I need to do. I'll go out there, I'll do that, I'll deliver, I'll give you some feedback, but that's kind of the limit of what they want to commit to. So just have some awareness of who's going to be the right fit to be a part of a planning committee. And make sure that you have your involvement from senior leadership and board members, you know, that you're keeping them up to date, that this is something that's happening. Yeah, don't try to boil the ocean. I think that this is honestly something that we've learned from. You know, we've had times where we've tried to do too much too fast and too broad, frankly, and too vague. That's where we really said, you know, what does this really mean? Because we might have had program managers at different sites who were interpreting things differently. And then all of a sudden, you're not far off from some chaos at that point in terms of who's doing what and what needs to get done to meet those goals. And do you even have a sense of clear focus area? Like Julie said, the process can't be rushed. If you're a sole proprietor, or you're, you know, independent, or it is a side hustle, some dedicated time just on this, you know, you might be able to get through something in a few weeks or a month, you know, if this is all you're focused on. Again, other organizations, this could be that 3 to 6 months process for sure. And, you know, continuously tending to it on top of managing the strategy over that 3 to 5 year period is something to take into consideration. Like Julie said, a company like Nike, this is people's jobs. 8 hours, you know, more than 8 hours a day, but day in and day out. So be mindful, that's how much, you know, of an impact this is going to have. And then finally, be prepared and committed and accepting of change. I don't know anyone's strategic plan who doesn't go through some modifications, because you have to constantly take into consideration, again, those environmental opportunities and threats. If you're presented with a great opportunity that's not built into your strategic plan, it's not to say don't move forward with it. It's just saying, hey, there's a reason that this opportunity has come our way and that we could be a good fit for it. But what does this mean in terms of adjusting our strategic plan? Recognizing that. Okay.
Or having the discipline because of your plan to turn away from that opportunity.
Yeah, maybe it's really not an alignment.
Yes. That's much harder.
Yeah, and you know, and you'll find that sometimes people will say, hey, you're really effective in doing this work. And they just think that you're going to want other projects or other work because you're so good at it. But if it's not in alignment with where you're going, you know, being able to say no is a big thing, you know, and it's hard to say no when it's really flattering that people think so highly of the work that you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Sweet. I know that took a good chunk of our time, but yeah, let's just open it up. I mean, I kind of gave you guys a lot. Questions, thoughts? Anything we can do to diffuse your anxiety if you have it?
I have a question. Who's chatting? Sorry, I can't see. Allison, did you have a question? You can go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for this. You know, as I was listening to the presentation, I do, you know, realize that we do have a mission. We do have a vision and a mission, but one of the things is in regards to values. I really liked what you said about incorporating not only, you know, our clients and our patients that we're serving, but also our staff and even our volunteers. We have a huge volunteer base who actually, you know, go out into the community and talk with women and encouraging them on their journey. So I think it's important to have that vision or those values for those, for our volunteers, for our staff as well, and not only our clients. So we're further along than I had thought, which is good. You know, being in business for 20 years, our mission and vision is the same, but the way we execute it now is different than it was 20 years ago. So it's putting all those pieces together and seeing, you know, what the next 3 or 5 years will be. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I have a question. For the businesses that are sole proprietors, so like there's, you know, they're on their own, how would you recommend them kind of getting a jump start? And I know you could do a SWOT analysis as yourself and stuff like that, but do you have any recommendations on like who to get involved in the process, like maybe customers or, I know you mentioned it slightly, but who would you recommend? Or how would you recommend getting started when you are the only person in your business?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, one, give yourself the time to say, like, I'm spending an hour, 2 hours, and I'm focusing on this, like, so that I can really just have an authentic conversation about what is working, those strengths, where is there a weakness area, you know, and start to get that from your perspective, you know, and just allow yourself the time to be honest about that. And then I think those next steps are, you know, where do you have connections to folks that you feel like are reliable resources to you, who can kind of give you that candid feedback? And, you know, what do you need in order to feel comfortable with the candid feedback? Because maybe something that you think is a strength, maybe people don't feel like you're quite there yet in terms of a strength, in terms of the business delivery or whatnot. And I think that's, you know, that's the other discussion, is where are you finding connections to other folks when you are running solo? To start there, especially if you're also in early development stages and you don't necessarily have a strong or established, you know, customer base, you know, or consumer base, or folks who are actually using services or purchasing product or whatnot. And you think that, you know, that's part of that relationship building that comes out of this process. I don't know. Go ahead, Julie.
I would take a shot at going through this process, at least through the focus areas. And maybe the goals. And then I would definitely get whoever my consumer, customer, client is, get some feedback from the people that are actually going to be benefiting from my services or my product. And then, you know, I have a private practice in counseling, and I do have some entrepreneurs that are in my practice, and a lot of them have kind of their own informal board of directors, people that they go to for advice, and sometimes it's fellow colleagues in the same competitive space. Go to them and say, hey, I've kind of sketched out this strategic plan. What do you think? Do you think I'm missing some opportunities? Do you think the market I'm trying to enter is saturated? Is there a disruptor or a niche that I'm not thinking of that maybe I could, you know, enter into? Asking those kinds of questions after you've done a start of it. Because, you know, I'm sure if you're already running a business, whatever, you know, growth, part of the growth segment it's in, that you have some idea of what you want to do with it. So take a shot at a rough draft and then get some feedback. Don't go, you know, deep into action plans and so forth, but get feedback as to whether or not you're going in the right direction. Definitely from customers, definitely from other people that are doing something similar to you, or trusted advisors that know a lot about business, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I think the connections is just such a huge piece, especially when you're running solo, is who can you still feel connected to, that where you feel that the feedback and the information they're going to give you is valid and trusted.
Yeah, you know, finding out what problems your customers need solved that maybe you're not addressing, you know, areas that you need to get into. I mean, that's kind of what marketing is about, solving the customer's problems, and finding out what those are. Mm-hmm. and where your capabilities intersect with that.
For sure.
Any other questions? Cool. Julie and Lindsay, thank you so much for your time on this. Is it okay if, I know we had a few people pop in and out, if they have any questions, is it okay if I give them your email to ask those
Absolutely.
questions? Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the recording available in our webinar library. And I just greatly appreciate your time. I definitely have like so many ideas, and it was very informative and very motivational to get started on a strategic plan, because I think it really does help guide success into a business or to an organization. So I do really greatly appreciate your guys' time, and thank you everyone for coming.
1 second.